Well, if the preseason is any indication on what this upcoming regular season and postseason is going to be like, then buckle your seatbelts for yet another asinine year around the National Football League. And this is an Around the NFL edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm your host, Mike Asti, coming at you from up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. This broadcast also made possible thanks to SteelersNow.com and these signs behind me, Beaver County Auto. Now, Andrew Luck shocked the world with the news of his sudden retirement, which weirdly came out midway through the third preseason game, which, as Mike Tomlin always tells us, is a dress rehearsal of sorts for week one. So that's when you usually see your starters. He wasn't even dressed, so that kind of was the first sign, and then the shocking news of his retirement came out, and social media reacted. Fans reacted at the stadium, probably seeing the news on social media. They booed him. It was ridiculous. It was asinine. Here it is, and my initial reaction there. Andrew Luck doesn't owe the fans anything, and they booed him anyway, and he doesn't. It was his decision. Played 7 years in the NFL, only really actually 6 years of action due to taking 1 year off to recover an injury, and gave his life to the game. And yes, he was a top draft pick coming out of college, and maybe you expected what you had from Peyton Manning right before, and championships and MVPs and a Hall of Fame career, and it got stopped short because of all the injuries, because of all the rehab, and it's up to him, though. So it's up to him, and he probably waited to this point because, hey, he wanted to really, really play and didn't realize the rehab and wanted to do everything he could to play. He's coming off of being comeback player of the year last year, almost an MVP, and wanted another year in Frank Wright's offense, I'm sure. Doesn't happen, though. And it was being compared often, as it really still is, because it's that topic that just won't die, with everyone being so shocked, kind of a polarizing topic, at least on the reaction to the Andrew Luck retirement news. But everybody comparing it to the recent retirements, whether it be in the National Football League or other sports. And they've gone on, especially in the NFL, over the years. This goes way, way, way back. To the point of Calvin Johnson recently, not too long ago, retiring at age 30 after a Hall of Fame career with the Detroit Lions where he revolutionized the position. And I saw that first as a WVU alum in a bowl game and what he did there with Georgia Tech. But also going way back to Jim Brown, one of the greatest players in the league history, one of the most iconic figures in league history. He retired early. He didn't end up with as long of a career as maybe he should have. He retired to go into movies, just kind of sick of it in terms of playing in the National Football League, and that was way back, way before the money that's around these days. And he went into another outlet, another venue that actually made him more money at the time, as crazy as that is. But he retired relatively early, had the records, which were since broken, but retired then, still early, and running backs could play a few more years. He didn't. Rob Gronkowski, and that going really recent, that's within the calendar year here of Andrew Luck's news, after a Super Bowl championship with the Patriots this past season. Gronk had more of a healthy year than he had prior recent seasons, able to win another championship, his third ring. For my money, the greatest tight end of all time, if you look at the overall body of work in terms of his talent, what he actually produced, how dominant he was, almost a Shaq-like dominance at his position. And yes, he wasn't always healthy. Yes, even one of those championship years, he was often injured, didn't really contribute, but did to the others. And you could kind of be left with saying, what if? It could have been more. It could have been a Tony Gonzalez type of career where all the numbers, all the records are there. It was 20 years. You know, the stats are there to back it up, even if the championships are not, because he played as long as he possibly really could. That's what Tony Gonzalez got. That's what, say, a Brett Favre or Gronk's teammate and Tom Brady, who's still going at it and wants to keep going at it for 5 more years maybe. But Andrew Luck, another quarterback who I can't say doesn't love the game as much as Brady or Favre. You may think he does, and maybe he does as well. Ends up capping it at only a 7-year career, only really 6 years of actual time playing in the National Football League. And his numbers are here. I mean, they're not bad by any means. I mean, these are Andrew Luck's numbers starting in 2012. You're looking at immediately 4,000 plus passing yards, little dip under that the next season, but then again, a career year in terms of his yardage, 4,700 plus. Often injured in 2015, but still played well, went in there. That was half a season basically for him. He then would come back the next year, could have won another Comeback Player of the Year award, really. 4,200 plus passing yard, 30 plus touchdowns, had the 40 TDs in 2014. Yes, the interceptions are there, but they never were too crazy after his first few seasons. And then last year, Comeback Player of the Year after missing all of 2017. Missed all of 2017. The Colts weren't a contender. They didn't even have the team they have now with Brissett and et cetera, and more comfort around the offensive line. 4,500 plus passing yards, almost 4,600, 39 touchdowns, almost another TD. Would have given him another 40 touchdown season. 15 picks, but come on now with all the numbers. A Comeback Player of the Year award. Could have been an MVP type of season, really. Certainly was up there. 67% completion percentage with all the yards. So that's an elite season if I've ever seen one in terms of almost 70% completion, which is a big deal in terms of your efficiency, and all the yards and TDs were there. So he was putting up the numbers and being efficient, giving you kind of everything you'd want for a quarterback last year. And yet, he ends up now calling it quits. And there was another injury. There was rumors of a calf injury, maybe more rehab. Maybe he wasn't going to start the season. Didn't see him at all in the preseason. Didn't see him at training camp. But that could be chalked up as being a veteran who was injured recently. Okay, no big deal there. You feel like you can get over it and he'll still play. There were no reports of him being immediately out for the year or anything like that. But based on what he was saying, maybe that was going to be the case. And Andrew Luck hangs it up. Again, his decision, the timing does kind of suck, but I'm sure he dragged it out as long as possible because he really, really wanted to play. I mean, just look at his press conference and you can kind of see that. But here's the difference. Not just the timing, where Gronk made the announcement soon after the Super Bowl, and he recently has said maybe he'll come back if he gets the joy again, and he has all these other business ventures, including CBD oil and all of that. But he already established himself that even if he never plays again, the man's going to the Hall of Fame. Gronk's going to the Hall of Fame. Gronk's multiple-time Super Bowl champion, but that's even just what the team does. He was an integral part of those championships, and his numbers are there. His single seasons are there. His dominance is there. Just ask the Steelers, especially a couple years ago in that secondary defense. And just he was carrying them, and I was in the press box to see it, like a transformer. That's how dominant Gronk was. There's really no specimen like him at that position in terms of how dominant he was. Yeah, others put up numbers. Shannon Sharp, Tony Gonzalez, Antonio Gates, Kellen Winslow Sr. They put up numbers, but they weren't as dominant at that position while he played like Gronk. Gronk's going to the Hall of Fame even if he never plays again. Okay, you can argue about whether best ever if he played enough and compiled. I could say he's the Sandy Koufax of his position because he didn't play the full career, did have injuries, but still I could argue as best ever, certainly one of. Regardless, he's a Hall of Famer. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Gronk will be there. Slam dunk guarantee. Calvin Johnson, modern day, revolutionized the position. I mean, he was putting up video game gaudy numbers before they were cool. And yes, there were Hall of Famers with great numbers before him, but he was really making it nuts in terms of doing it in single seasons, in terms of catches, in terms of overall yardage, in terms of what he does with the football per catch, in terms of making something happen out of nothing, in terms of full athletic ability and just being a freak of nature. No, he didn't win a championship. No, the Lions weren't really that good when he was there. But individually, he was a stud, he was a beast, and the receiver position, in all honesty, you can't really hold it against him if he doesn't win. Yes, Jerry Rice won championships, but T.O. didn't, and T.O. would have been Super Bowl MVP had they won that game with the Eagles in the Super Bowl, only in the one, but a great player. All those numbers should have been in the Hall of Fame right away. One of the best ever. Randy Moss didn't win a championship. Randy Moss, one of the best ever. Talk about revolutionizing the position and being a freak. That's Randy Moss. His nickname says it. All the numbers are there. No, he didn't win a championship. And yes, he was on a Patriots team that went undefeated in the regular season. Then they lost the Super Bowl and appeared in another one with the Niners. And all those championships Brady and Belichick won, that was the best Patriots team. And it was partly because of Randy Moss, one of the single best players on that Patriot run. Probably the second best behind Brady in terms of ever playing with the Patriots in those 15 years under Belichick. Belichick will tell you that. So he wasn't on one of the championship teams, but a Hall of Famer, obviously, was a first ballot slam dunker. And Jim Brown, an iconic figure in the sport, won a championship, even though prior to the Super Bowl era, and revolutionized the position in his own way in terms of how dominant he was. People say maybe he's the greatest football player of all time still, and all those decades ago when he played. Just how much of a beast he was, the fact that he was so strong, the fact that he could beast mode over tacklers. Think how he would have been in a video game, honestly. And the numbers were there overall. And he retired early. All of them Hall of Famers, all of them slam dunk honors. Nobody would doubt them, and they were solidified the moment they retired. And Gronk, maybe he'll come back, but they all retired, and we haven't seen Calvin since. I doubt we're going to. He's appeared in Dancing with the Stars, not the NFL. The others never came back. Barry Sanders, of course, another one. Barry Sanders would have broke Jim Brown's record for the rushing total if he would have played several more years. Emmitt Smith ended up doing it, but Barry Sanders, a great player as well, another Detroit Lion. History kind of repeated itself there with Calvin Johnson and Barry before him. Barry, one of the greatest running backs ever, I could argue the best, certainly dominated the position, certainly was somebody that nobody could handle and defenses had fits to deal with. Didn't win a championship, but again, not his fault at all. A 9-year career, I believe, retiring around 30. And you wish it could have been longer. You wish he would have set that record, but he didn't. Hall of Famer, obviously. Here's the difference. Andrew Luck, great player, all the hype coming in, and I'm not holding against him that they didn't win a championship because, again, that's also not his fault. And it's partly the Colts' fault that this happened and he retired early, if not all their fault, because they didn't protect him. Not this management, but the previous management didn't provide him an offensive line. They didn't provide him just due protection. They prioritized all these weapons, which are great. They helped his numbers, I'm sure, T.Y. Hilton, etc. But you got to have the protection almost more so. He was great enough. He could have done the Brett Favre stuff and made something out of nothing weapon-wise. He would have rather had the protection to allow him to play those type of games and not get hurt and be there for you and have a longer career that could have maybe led you to eventually a championship that maybe would have done so this year. They were 8-1 Vegas odds, I believe. Some people were predicting them to win the championship this year. At least win the division, at least be the best in the division. Maybe go further. The Patriots just won. Maybe they finally take a year off and they could finally crack through and win the AFC. They were in the AFC Championship game a few years ago with the Deflategate. Great year for Luck. Didn't crack through. Maybe now would have been the time. But he retires and that doesn't happen. And while disappointing and sucks for the fans, it's again his decision. But it's different than the others. And it sucks more in this way. It's different than Jim Brown. It's different than Barry Sanders. It's different than Calvin Johnson. It's different than even Gronk in this same year. Because when they retired, they were guaranteed bona fide Hall of Famers. And some, you could argue, were the best ever at their position, even though they never played again and didn't have a long career and only gave you kind of a sniff and half of what many other legends would give you in terms of an overall career. 15, 16, 20 years for legends usually in pro sports, even in the NFL. And they gave you 8, 9, 10 years max. And that does suck in a way. But they were Hall of Famers. They're in Canton. It didn't matter to their legacy, really. It almost made it better in a way. It's almost made Barry Sanders a prolific, iconic figure more so. Because people could say then that it was a guarantee he would have broke that rushing record. Okay, Emmitt Smith, you had the team success, you had the offensive line, you had the protection. Go ahead. You get the record. But we all know Barry Sanders was the best of the era, was better than you individually. The defenses didn't know what to do with him more so. He didn't have the protection, didn't have the teammates. Defenses were keying on him. Whereas with Emmitt Smith, they're keying on him, but also Michael Irvin, Troy Aikman, etc. And that offensive line, one of the best ever during that Cowboys run in those Super Bowl championship teams in the early 90s. And a lot of those years that led to those yards. You could say Barry Sanders is still the best. What if? It's unlike, say, some other athletes out there that they hang on too long. Or maybe Brett Favre did this. He put all those numbers up, but his last year and a half, fans got annoyed. He wasn't good his last year with Minnesota. Yes, he was good the year before and had an elite season. But they kind of got pissed with all this, will he play, won't he play, the waffling. Became drama, different scandals he was in. If he would have retired in 2007, cut it off there, NFC Championship game, yes, he threw the pick, but had the ring already, had the MVPs, had the great numbers. I think the legacy actually might be better overall, honestly. Maybe the numbers would be a little lesser career-wise, but the legacy might be better overall because you wouldn't have as many people who were annoyed and kind of turned on him with his personality dipping and kind of holding franchises hostage and the Jets experience. That wouldn't have happened if he cut it off then. The legacy might have been better. So when you think about it, Andrew Luck retires early. He gives you 6 years of playing. Doesn't give the Colts the ring they wanted. And while they dreamed that it would be like Aaron Rodgers taking over for Brett Favre or Steve Young taking over for Joe Montana, it would be their next Hall of Famer, Andrew Luck taking over for Peyton Manning. It gave you 6 good years. He had some elite seasons in there. He was a comeback player of the year, 4,000 plus passing yards a couple times, almost 40 TDs twice, did it at least, did it once, one away from doing it twice. They were a contender for sure. They had an AFC Championship game appearance. That's great. But no MVPs, and you do feel like you want more out of it. And I'll throw the numbers up here again. And yeah, the Steelers are going to benefit. SteelersNow.com, go to read about that. Our ops guy actually joined in the writing circuit there on the outlet. But it's going to help the Steelers for sure to face a backup quarterback. And there's no guarantee losses. They've had upset losses in the last few years on teams they definitely should beat. But it's better to face Brissett than face Luck for sure. And Joe details that, SteelersNow.com. But look at the numbers here. Again, career-wise, 86 games started, obviously. 53 and 33, so that's the record. But that's, again, just a team thing. I'll focus on the individual. Out of 3,290 attempts, 2,000 completions exactly. How weird that is. 60% completion percentage, and he's coming off of the 67%er, which is maybe one of the better elite seasons you could ask for because of how high that completion percentage is with the yards. Would have been an MVP in almost any other year under Mahomes, obviously, and Drew Brees. I would say third behind those two last year, but a great year, comeback player of the year. 39 TDs, 6.1 per 15 picks last year, but 23,671 overall yards in his career, so just under 25,000, which is a nice benchmark to have. 30,000 obviously is even better. 171 touchdowns, so under 200 again. 83 picks, but that's still a solid ratio there. Good. Would have been better if he kept playing. If he was healthy, it'd even be that much better. But even if he wasn't healthy, and Andrew Luck at 80% is better than most quarterbacks out there, and say he crawls to 300 touchdown passes and 35,000 yards or 40,000 yards, whether he wins a championship or not, you don't have to win a title to be in the Hall of Fame as a quarterback. Dan Marino, Warren Moon, Dan Fouts. Maybe they would be the Dan Fouts of this era, like Philip Rivers kind of is. Philip Rivers is going to be in the Hall of Fame with all those numbers and yards, but hasn't won a ring. And yeah, there's a lot of great quarterbacks this era that may overshadow him, and certainly going to hurt the case now, but he would have at least put some numbers up a few more years, say 5 more years, you get to those benchmarks, it would have helped him in the Hall of Fame case. Whether that's fair or unfair, this is just reality. It would have helped him in the Hall of Fame case, and unfortunately it doesn't happen. All his right to choose to retire whenever he wants, but because he does so, one of the risks and one of the casualties that he has to be aware of, and I'm sure he is as he thought about it, I'm sure that's why it dragged out to when it did, is he kisses goodbye to the Hall of Fame. His father's probably going to be there as a builder for what he did just in football in general, what he did in the NFL and what he's done with West Virginia University as an athletic director there. He was the AD of my alma mater for a while and certainly helped their transition from the Big East to the Big 12. Now leading the XFL, and I know the rumors of Andrew Luck's going to be there someday soon, and maybe he'll be back a year or so to the NFL or the XFL, but the Colts own his rights, and I doubt they're going to give him up for him to go to the XFL. But unlike the others, unlike Jim Brown when he retired and never came back, unlike Barry Sanders, who created one of the greatest what-if stories ever and still gave you that definitive answer as him being one of the best ever with a short career, Calvin Johnson revolutionized the position, wow factor, Gronk, dominant, Shaq-like at his position, I could say best ever, certainly a Hall of Fame career. These guys retired earlier than you would want. They didn't give you more, and yet they're all in the Hall of Fame or going to be there. Not the case for Luck. So it sucks. It's different than the rather early retirements, more of a risk, And that shows you how much his body was killing him. That shows you how much he was mentally and physically beat down and drained and had no joy, everything that he said, to make this decision. Because as great as Andrew Luck was, as much as I loved watching him, and he was a great player, he was ascending to that level, and he was the top draft pick in terms of quarterback position coming out since probably Elway or Marino. And I never thought there was a question between him and RG3. It was always him. He fit that bill for the prototypical success story in the NFL more than RG3 ever could, and their careers weren't even close. Andrew Luck's obviously was better, even though RG3 is still hanging around as a backup with the Ravens. But Andrew Luck's early retirement, as great as he was, is different than the others, different than the other legends and the other great players who retired earlier than you'd want, earlier than you'd figure, because they're Hall of Famers. And Andrew Luck, unfortunately, isn't and won't be. That does it for the Around the NFL edition. I may add these to the docket here. Obviously, it's going to be Steelers-centered and Steelers focused once the season kicks into gear. And I did a recent show. I thought about doing it again, but didn't want to retool the same old show. And I will put up something for the Steelers before their preseason closes. Or maybe not before the preseason closes, but maybe so, depending on my schedule here. Before the preseason closes, or at least before the week of the preseason ending overall. So before the regular season kicks off, maybe, is more fair. About different guys that, cracked the roster and made the team that I think would surprise you based on what we saw throughout training camp. Cough, cough. Artie Burns. I know you guys hate him, but he had a good offseason. But go check out the last Steelers show, or at least the last one currently up, the battle between Josh Dobbs and Mason Rudolph for the backup position for the Steelers. That was the talk all offseason. They battled it out, and I think it's clear who was the better quarterback, who would be the better quarterback moving forward for the Steelers after Ben, who should be the backup quarterback. And no, by the way, here's a hint. No, it's not the guy who played in the regular season last year. No, it's not the more athletic guy who relies on athleticism. Yes, it's more of the Andrew Luck type, that prototypical guy who's more accurate, who can drive the field more, maybe similar to Ben, where you don't have to change as much. That's Mason Rudolph. So I gave it away there. But stick here and follow up with all our family of outlets, even some that are new now. Pittsburgh Sports Now, of course, PittsburghSportsNow.com, the mothership, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, of course, SteelersNow.com, where you get tales like that one about Luck and the schedule getting easier for the Steelers with that news. SteelersNow.com, and also my alma mater joins the circuit with WVSportsNow.com. I did do a show already there, so it's under the mic drop section underneath their show tab on the top of the page. Did a show about the expectations the Mountaineer fans should feel coming in to this season. The first under Neil Brown. He is the right guy taking over for Holgorsen, but it might be the same as it was record-wise, and don't freak out. You got to give him some time. It'll be fine. That does it here for me on this one, this Around the NFL edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Even find me on Twitter there, send hate mail, but try to be nice. I'm trying to keep it a little nicer here right now on the Twitterverse, but if you want to drop in the DMs, go ahead and send me the hate. I will probably ignore you. In fact, yes, I will ignore you. Thanks to the sponsors, Beaver County Auto behind me, and of course, SteelersNow.com. Wow. I mean, between helmet drama, different injuries, including feet, and mostly that's all on Hard Knocks, but this one wasn't on a soap opera, but it became one anyway with Andrew Luck's sudden retirement, and it sucks. It's sad, but it's not like the other early retirements because Andrew Luck's not a Hall of Famer. Damn.